Today, I'm going to give you a clear-cut strategy on how to get shredded. And yes, this is an ambitious goal, but it's absolutely possible if you approach it correctly. Now, by the end of this video, you are going to have an actionable roadmap, a step-by-step guide on how to go from, I look pretty good, to veins popping, abs out, and truly proud to show off your physique anywhere, anytime. Now, first up, we have to know the destination that we are seeking, because what does shredded even mean to you? This goes past just a number on the scale. Now, when people come to me and they say, I want to be shredded, I want to look jacked, I want others to ask if I compete professionally. For some people, this means getting to 10% body fat. For others, this means getting to the weight that they were last at in high school. Some people just want visible abs. Others want deep cuts in their shoulders and arms. Now, it is absolutely key to pin down whether or not you are chasing a body fat percentage, a scale weight, a specific look in the mirror or in the gym, or visual landmarks like having carved out abs. This is where a lot of people go wrong. If you are fixated on scale weight without considering how this is actually going to show up in your physique, you could cut a little too aggressively and actually put yourself at risk for losing muscle. Ask yourself, when I say shredded, what does this actually look like? How do I want to look upon waking up? How do I want to look in the gym? And is this something that reasonably I can track without exclusively going off just scale weight? If it's more about the look, then we absolutely need to be taking measurements and consistent progress pictures in the same conditions, in the same lighting. And remember, different bodies store different body fat in different places. So shredded for someone might actually not include a six-pack. Shredded for someone else might mean that their stomach is absolutely peeled and you can see vascularity in throughout their abs and their obliques. So I have a friend who was determined to return to her high school weight, and in her mind, 115 was the point in which she would feel her absolute best. Yet she got to this point and she wasn't super happy with her composition. She felt skinny fat. And frankly, it comes down to she didn't have enough muscle to have that super ultra fit look that she was actually seeking. This story underscores the fact that shredded for some people might be arbitrary from the scale weight they think they need to sit at. For most, it's going to rely solely on what their definition of shredded actually means and what this looks like, meaning we should be going off body composition and using scale weight as a secondary metric. Ask yourself, what truly motivates me? Is it just seeing a number on the scale that makes you feel like you're light and you're leaner? Or is it putting on your favorite swimsuit, putting on a tank top, and feeling confident no matter where you are? Number 2, create a plan and make it a good one. Now that you know your end game, you have your compass, you know the direction that you're going towards. Maybe you decide, I want a six-pack by my birthday, or I want to be able to wear a tank top all summer long. Now you have to determine, how long are you actually going to diet for? Now this is going to come down to how much body fat you're actually looking to lose. A good rule of thumb is aiming between 0.5 to 1% rate of loss per week. For most people, this is going to be somewhere between 0.7 to 1.5 pounds off every single week. And if you're unsure of how much body fat you actually need to lose to achieve that ultra shredded physique, err on the side of giving yourself a little bit of extra time. The thing is, rush diets can lead to either muscle loss or rebound weight gain. The upper end of how long I think someone should spend in deficit is roughly 25 weeks. If losing at, let's say, 1 pound a week still doesn't give you enough time, even under the guise of 25 weeks of fat loss, then this might be something that's worth breaking up into multiple fat loss phases. The next question you need to ask yourself is, how hard will you diet? Now, a moderate deficit that is pretty feasible for most of you guys watching this is going to be anywhere from 250 to 500 calories off your maintenance per day. Now, a more aggressive deficit, let's say 700 to 1,000 calories a day, is going to require a lot of mental grit and discipline. And although it can speed up your fat loss, this is going to be something that simultaneously incurs even more dietary fatigue. Now, you also need to consider your level of compliance. What is your actual skill when it comes to dieting and adherence? Are you the kind of person that performs well under pressure and thrives from a challenge? Or do you actually cave when things are a little bit too rigid? Now, the more shredded you want to be, it's more than likely that you're going to have to dial in and push yourself to a level of discomfort that you might not have experienced thus far. Now, if you're chasing sub 15% body fat, you can't half commit. Now, it's also important to ask, how flexible do you plan to be? If, let's say, you're 8 weeks into your fat loss phase and you're ahead of schedule, will you slow that rate of change per week by reducing your deficit? And on the contrary, if you're falling behind pretty soon into a diet, will you plan to get more aggressive? The plan is your starting point, but it's not set in stone. If you are going to make changes to the kind of deficit that you're creating each and every week, do so systematically. If you keep changing your mind the morning of based on how you're feeling, ultimately this is going to sabotage your consistency and make it really difficult to see this diet out. The key is creating a timeline, writing out the approximate deficit that you aim to be in, have a target weekly rate of change, and go off your averages, not just highs and lows. Keep this information visible so you remember where you're headed and how you're going to get there. Number 3, execute. Now, execution is typically where people end up falling off. The plan can be wonderful. It can be the most optimal, but if you're not actually doing it, it can't help you. Now, consider the 80-20 rule. This is probably something that you've heard about, and for some, 80% adherence is probably going to get you decent results, but to really dial in and to get to ultra low body fat percentages, it's probably going to take closer to 90, 95, if not 100% compliance. Ask yourself, are you skipping taking that daily weigh-in? Are you overeating on the weekends when you have a little bit more time and you're starting to feel bored? Sabotage is very sneaky and it creeps in pretty easily the longer that you've been dieting. Now, the leaner that you want to get, the more adherence needs to be dialed in. Now, depending on how fast or extreme your cut actually is, maybe you're able to do one cheat meal a week, or maybe you find that you actually operate better when you don't have that temptation every few days. Now, when I got my leanest, I found that I did incredibly well without having a true untracked meal each and every week. This allowed me to have consistent weigh-ins, accurate data, and ultimately feel like I could just focus on the next week's goal. And sure, as I got leaner, I found that a higher calorie day was beneficial, but this still had to have constraints going into it. Now, it's important to ask yourself, how often are you going to check in? And if you have a coach, maybe there's a designated time in which it's expected for you to touch base with them, send in pictures, let them know how you're doing. But if you're self-coaching, you are driving the ship. Now, personally, I recommend checking in with yourself formally once a week, assuming that you're self-coached. Now, for me, this means a complete report on the objectives, the subjectives, measurements, weekly pictures. And don't get me wrong, if it's your planned check-in and you found that you slept really poorly the night before, you had a lot of sodium, or maybe you didn't use the bathroom, you woke up feeling run down, woke up feeling sick, and you want to push that check-in one day, there's nothing wrong with this. But try to have a maximum amount of time that you're allowing yourself to wait in between those touch points. I do this even with my own clients. If it's an off day and it's not representative of how they're actually doing, just push it back one day. However, what you don't want to do is fall into this trap where you're going 10, 14, even 21 days without taking a look at your physique and giving your program an honest assessment. Number 4, assess. So if you're following the plan, fantastic. But how do you know it's actually working? This is where we have to define what dictates a good check-in, what dictates a bad one. For me, I like using a target rate of loss per week. Now, another measure might be looking at your actual measurements or looking at body composition and comparing your photos from this week compared to last week. Now, when assessing scale weight changes, this is where it can be tricky. For a lot of us, fluctuations of 2 to 4 pounds across an entire 7 series of data points is actually pretty normal. This is why I like looking at the weekly average, not just one weigh-in the day of your check-in and exclusivity. However, even within average to averages, there can be artificial inflations. This is super common, especially if we're looking at someone later in their luteal phase or during their menstrual cycle. This is why it's important to have a clear understanding as to what variables are going to influence scale weight, and being able to kind of zoom out and look at whether or not these weigh-ins are 100% accurate. Now, personally for me, strength and performance are also variables I'm going to pay attention to each and every week. It's one thing to lose weight. It's another thing to lose body fat, get to low body fat levels while preserving muscle mass. It's important to key up on where your numbers are each and every week. And this is where having a consistent training program that you're following makes a lot of sense in terms of assessing whether or not you're maintaining strength, getting stronger, or getting weaker. Maintaining strength and getting stronger are good indications that you are in fact retaining muscle. Now, although we can expect physiological adaptations as we get to lower body fat levels, we need to identify really what's the point in which dietary fatigue is too high. This is where we need to look at sleep, quality, duration, hunger, whether or not someone is having consistent bowel movements, and even within this scope, we can also dig into how the individual feels about these physiological adaptations. Now, personally for me, I like to catch things before they get into the red. When things are in the yellow or the orange, this is the point where we still have the ability to correct and pivot. When someone's in the red, they might find that dietary fatigue is just simply too high. And really, the only solutions they might find in the red is ending the diet. Catching these things before they're so problematic, so heavy, too big to handle is really what's going to keep you in this phase and reaching that finish line. Number 5, adjust. So as we're going through this fat loss phase and week to week, you're assessing your results, there's a certain point where you really have to have some foresight and consider, do I have enough muscle to even achieve the look that I'm seeking? Now, plenty of folks will start a diet with the goal that they want to get to 10%, 12%, even 15% body fat. And they might realize about halfway there that they actually are not really liking how they're beginning to look with less of their curves. And this is the part that is so individualized. What degree of shape curves do you want to have while still having ultra visibility at those specific landmarks? Those being maybe your abs, your legs, your glutes, your shoulders. Depending on how hard it is to continue seeing out the diet and how close you are to looking the way that you actually want to look, it might actually be in your best interest to pivot, go into a reverse diet, and spend some time intentionally building muscle. Now, the pivot isn't failure, it is strategic. If you're finding that week to week, even day to day, that you're liking the look less and less, it might be the fact that more muscle is actually the solution, not more fat loss. So let's tie this all together. Know your destination. Is it a specific scale weight? Is it a body fat percentage? Or is it a specific look? Create a plan. I would say most people are going to do best around that 500 to 750 calorie deficit per day. Any less, and you might not be motivated by the results you're seeing on a weekly basis anymore, and you could be putting yourself at risk for muscle loss, and realistically, adherence is going to be spotty, especially the longer that you do it. Execute. Track your adherence. You can even score it according to 7 days a week. How many days are you perfectly on track? How many overages or oopsies are you having per week? And how is this affecting your progress? Do consistent check-ins, maintain that discipline, and be honest about the changes that you're experiencing physiologically. Assess. Have a very clear definition for what a good check-in looks like. Watch your scale weight trends, but also be able to differentiate between accurate weigh-ins and artificially inflated weigh-ins. Measure performance. Take your photos in the same conditions, the same time, whether that be fasted or fed, almost the same day every single week. And adjust. If you are finding that you're falling behind or you're getting too far ahead, don't be afraid to manipulate calories or output. And if you realize muscle is lacking, decide whether or not there's any advantage in seeing out the diet, or whether it's in your best interest to actually pivot and enter a reverse diet. Getting to low body fats is intense, and it's very relative to the lowest point that you've been to previously. And it's not something that's inherently dangerous, but doing it incorrectly can result in hormonal imbalances, physiological adaptations, weight regain, and muscle loss. Remember, getting shredded, it is a moving target. Once you're there, you might love it or you might hate it. You might find that it's sustainable for a brief period, and past that, you'll actually feel better at a little bit higher of a body fat. For a lot of us, sitting at ultra low body fats is not going to be sustainable, and that's okay. Now, the real skill is knowing how to get in and get out without losing your mind or losing muscle. If it's your first time getting to this body fat level, it can be really tricky to reverse out of this and to come out of the diet. That's where having a coach and having someone guide you through this process can be so helpful. If this is something that you're interested in doing, definitely look at the links in my bio. I do offer one-on-one coaching as well as one-time consults. Thank you guys for listening. As always, I will see you in the next one.